Good morning. It's May 8th of 2012. I hope you guys are having a good spring. I'm going to talk to you today about a topic which I'm seeing a lot of. I mean, we're getting a lot of calls on it. I'm seeing a lot of court decisions on it. It is a big issue, and the topic is when is someone allowed to access or get a hold of your credit report, and when are they not allowed to get a hold of your credit report. And let me just tell you that this is basically regulated by law, by the Fair Credit Reporting Act, but it is something which, because of the language of the Fair Credit Reporting Act, there is some wiggle room. There are some hazy areas. There are some areas where it's gray, where it's not definite that a person can or cannot access your credit report. So I'm going to try to give you today, what I might call the bright line areas where a person is or is not allowed to access your credit report. In general, there are 7 areas or 7 instances when a person is allowed to access your credit report. I have to look at my little list just to make sure I don't forget anything. Number 1 would be a credit transaction that you initiate. For instance, if you go and apply for a loan, you apply for a car loan, you apply for a mortgage, the creditor is allowed to access your credit report at that point. Number 2 would be a business venture. If you're going into a business venture with someone and you are initiating the business venture, then the people that you're going into the business venture with, or the business, if it's an existing business, they are allowed to access your credit report. Number 3, if you apply for a job. Number 4, if you apply for insurance. In those instances, then they're allowed to access your credit report. Number 5 is what is called account review. If you have an existing account with a bank or a credit card company or a mortgage company, they are allowed to access your credit report, not all the time, but they're allowed to access your credit report to see if you still qualify for the loan that you have. As a practical matter, I can tell you that gets abused, and there's probably going to be some future litigation on that. The existing creditors access the credit reports for other reasons and use it for other reasons, which is not proper, but that's really a much longer discussion for another tape at a future time. Number 6 is child support. If you owe child support obligations, anyone who is interested or involved in collecting or enforcing the child support obligations can access your credit report. Number 7 is professional licenses. If you're applying for a professional license, medical license, legal license, contractor's license, those types of situations, the licensing agency is allowed to access your credit report. Now, those are in very, very broad terms. As I said, this is kind of a broad brush video. I can't get into the nitty-gritty of some of the litigation and some of the cases which have come down about when someone is and when someone is not allowed to access your credit report. I can tell you if it falls under one of those categories, and it falls squarely into one of those 7 categories, then the person pulling your credit report should be allowed by law to access your credit report. But let's also take a look at places where your credit report is being pulled when it's not allowed. Number 1, if you tell a company that you're doing business with not to pull your credit report, and there's no good reason to pull your credit report. Let me give you an example. We have a client in our office who went to buy a car, and he wanted to buy the car with cash, and he had the cash right there, right then, to buy the car. And he told the dealership, do not access my credit report. And the dealership went ahead and pulled his credit report anyway, and I'll tell you why the dealership went ahead and pulled his credit report. They wanted to see what kind of credit he had so they can upsell him on all the rigmarole, all the garbage the dealers always try to sell you after you bought a car, the window etchings and the gap insurance and all the other stuff, which, some of it is worthwhile, a lot of it is just worthless. The extended service contracts, which overlap the warranty. I think I've done other tapes on, on the stuff that dealers try to sell you, which probably is worthless. But that's why they pulled the credit report. That is not a permissible purpose. Let me tell you, if you're going into a transaction, if you want to control whether and how often the person, the creditor, for instance, pulls your credit report, you need to specify it. Almost all the contracts these days that I see that come into my office with this type of issue, they all have standard boilerplate language, usually on the very last page, usually in very, very tiny print. which basically says we are allowed to pull your credit report at will. And of course, you're in a hurry, there's a big stack of documents to sign, you don't read it, you don't think about it, you don't take it home and think about it overnight. You need to have something in writing as part of the transaction saying, do not pull my credit report, or you can only pull my credit report once. Another instance that we've seen that, we have some cases going on like this where a person goes in for a credit transaction and there is one permissible pull of the credit report, but not multiple permissible pulls. And suddenly they pull the credit report 9 times, that type of thing. As you may know from other videos that I've done, each and every time they do what is called a hard pull of a credit report, meaning in connection with a credit transaction, it actually depresses your credit score. So if they pull your credit report too often, the credit bureaus are getting better at making sure that if only one creditor is pulling it a certain number of times, it's not going to hurt your credit score as much, but still, make sure that they pull it once. Don't have the situation where they're pulling it 10 times. Write on the contract, you have permission to pull my credit report one time and one time only. If you assign this contract out to someone else, they only have permission to pull my credit report once. That, literally write it on the contract, because otherwise you are giving them basically carte blanche to pull the credit report as much as they want to, which can, under certain circumstances, damage your credit score. And it also means your credit report is floating out there in 10 different offices with 10 different low-wage employees who may be being paid by identity thieves to collect these things and sell them on the black market. You don't know. So that's why it's a good idea to limit the number of times that your credit report is being pulled. Write it right on the contract. You can pull it once, but you can't pull it more than once. If you are doing a cash transaction, and you are buying something with cash, or you have other financing, that's another situation where this comes up. People come in with their own loans. They have their own relationship with their own bank. Let's say they go into a car dealer, they want to buy a car, they already have a loan arranged for. There's no reason for the car dealer to pull the credit report. They've already got their own loan. There's no reason for the car dealer to say, oh, we have to pull your credit report to see if you qualify for the loan. If you're doing a cash transaction, if you have your own financing, you need to. It can't be verbal. Write on the contract, this is a cash transaction, or I have my own financing, you do not have permission to pull my credit report. Put it right down there. Believe me, if you have your own financing, or if it's a cash transaction, the dealership is going to want to do business with you, so they're not going to kick you out just because you don't want them to pull your credit report. If you have your own financing, or if it's cash, just write right on there, you do not have permission to pull my credit report. Another situation that we see a lot of, we see this all the time. This is not a permissible purpose, and that is in a divorce. Parties are divorcing. One spouse is concerned, maybe a little bit paranoid about the other spouse hiding assets. Sometimes it's paranoia, sometimes it's not. A credit report, as a practical matter, is not going to show hidden assets. I don't know where anyone gets that idea. But nonetheless, if you are going through a divorce and the opposing attorney, obviously your spouse, suing your spouse, so the issue of a spouse pulling your credit report wrongfully is going to come out in the divorce. But if the opposing attorney pulls your credit report, you would have a private right of action against him, because the divorce doesn't fall under any of these categories. The only exception would be if the opposing attorney is pulling the credit report in connection with enforcing a child support judgment. But if it's just one of these things where the spouses are a little bit worried about each other hiding assets, no, that is not a permissible purpose. If the opposing attorney pulls your credit report, then it's not righteous, and that is a situation where you would have a right of action under the Fair Credit Reporting Act against that attorney. In general, if it doesn't fall under one of the 7 categories that I've mentioned, then there is at least a good question as to whether or not there's a permissible purpose or an allowable purpose to pull the credit report. That's in general, number 1. Number 2, control the number of times that people can pull your credit report. Don't sign anything that gives people a blank check to pull your credit report as often as they like. Don't. And keep an eye on this, because, believe me, everyone out there wants to pull your credit report. I promise you. I don't care who you are. Everyone out there wants to pull your credit report because they want to sell you something, and they want to see how much credit you have, and they want to see whether or not that they can sell it to you, or they're gathering information on you, they're doing investigation on you. Believe me, your credit report is not something that should be freely disseminated out there. You should control it, and if people are pulling it wrongfully, sue them. And I'm dead serious. This is definitely a situation where there's no problem, or there should be no moral remorse about bringing a lawsuit against someone. Anyway, that's my talk for the morning. I hope you're doing well, and keep an eye on your credit reports. Take care.